Today is January 29th in the year 2022. The temperatures have dropped, not only where I am in New York, but from what I understand, in other places south of New York, bordering the United States. And so I'm finding ways to make it through. No different than how I have no idea how I made it through those 4 years. 4 years without running water, without electricity, and without heat in that house. And unlike corporate America, who has the mindset of remedy the situation first and haggle over dollars and who's responsible second. Our municipalities do not do that, okay? Otherwise, I would be fully intact from the 2015 episode that I endured that led me to 2019 and out the door and on the streets where I am right now. Always remedy the situation first to keep things moving at a steady pace. Haggle over dollars and who's responsible for what after the fact. It's one of the most valuable lessons I ever learned in corporate America that is not carried through to any one of our government entities as we know them today. But the cold itself, it brings me to different places. So there is a fine line, a very fine line between life and death. And in between life and death, you're going to find the realm of the uncaring people. Because when you have life and you interact with caring people, it provides you with an opportunity by knowing the caring people to live a life worth living. But when you are alive and you're bordering on the realms between life and death, you will encounter all the uncaring people out there in the world. I sent my stepfather a card, and this was a while back, and I said, I just wanted to thank you. I wanted to thank you for all the years that you provided for my mother. You provided a roof over her head, and you kept her safe and sound all those years. And I wanted to thank you for that. And I'm sincere about that. And so I told my father what I did, and he said that was the right thing to do. Because that man did provide for your mother, and he provided for you. And that man deserves a thank you. And so my conversations with my father are pretty deep and unique. And I'm so grateful that although I haven't seen him since 1997, that, you know, we are still close like we always were. And I'm so grateful that I can talk to him every day. My mother, I think about her all the time. You know, you can't go through life seeing and touching things that don't reflect on the important pieces of your life. So I think about her, and I think about when my stepfather used to work 16-hour shifts to keep that roof over our heads. And he'd call her during the day, and he would say, take care of the kids, whatever you have to do, make sure they have dinner, for themselves and get yourself ready because I'm going to take you out someplace special when I get home from work. All I need to do is jump in the shower, change my clothes, and then, we're going to take off. And she would be so happy and so excited when he did that. It was the cutest thing ever. And so she'd, make herself busy and buzz around, get all these things done like in no time at all, and then head in to take a shower. She had her own bathroom. They did. Adjacent to their bedroom, and then I would listen for when the water stopped, and I knew she was out of the shower. And then I'd knock on her door and I'd say, "Mom, can I come in?" And she'd be like, "Yeah, but shut the door behind you while I'm getting dressed." So I'd go in her room, and I did the same thing every time. While she was picking out her clothes and jewelry and everything and getting ready, she used to let me get into her closet, and I'd pull out this bag of old pictures that she had, and I'd spread them all out. And I always picked up this one picture, and I think she caught on after a while. It was a picture in this old cabin. We lived there for a while with my mother. My grandmother and my grandfather sitting on a couch, her mother and father, 3 rifles on the wall. And I would always sit back and hold that picture. It was the only picture that I'd hold out of all the pictures that I spread out. And I'd never say anything, but when it was time to pick up the pictures, "Tam, I'm almost ready, and how do I look?" And I'd always say, "You look fabulous." And so she'd kneel down and start picking up the pictures with me, and I'd always be holding this picture, and then I'd always ask a question. I'd say, I remember it started out like this: "Do you have any pictures of black, Mom? In there somewhere? Maybe in another bag? Do you have any pictures of black?" "I don't know, honey. I'll have to look the next time, okay?" And then, would put all the pictures away, and I'd hand her the picture that I had in my hand. And then the next time around, the same thing would happen. And then I'd be holding that same picture, and then I'd say, "Mom, did you find any pictures of black yet?" And she said, "No, honey, I haven't found any pictures of black, but I'm sure there's some pictures of black in there somewhere." And then I'd say, I'd expand on my question. "So who were those people that day?" And that she's like, "What, people in the picture? That's your grandmother, that's your grandfather." And I'm like, "No, the people that day." And then she'd take the picture away and then pick up all the pictures and then think, like, what is she asking? And so the next time it happened, she said, "All I know those people by is old Bert and old Gert. And if there's any pictures of black in there, Tam, I'll give them to you someday." And then she said, "Until then, I want you to hold on to this picture to remind you so you remind me to find pictures of black." And I was like, okay. So I held that picture, and I had it in my personal belongings like forever. An original picture of my grandmother and my grandfather in that house that we used to live in. And Black was this dog that showed up. He was a wolf, a black wolf. And some things happened. It was just my mother and me and my 2 older sisters up in that cabin. It used to be my grandmother's and my grandfather's. And it started out that, well, she couldn't find the keys to the car. And then, while we were trying to find the keys to the car, the temperatures changed outside, and then we were using this gas stove, a propane stove, to keep the place warm. And she had this little clicker. It was like a round, metal round piece, it almost looked like a safety pin, and she would click it to get the stove, over the burner to get the stove started. And that came up missing. And all these things started coming up missing, and she was getting like frustrated because she couldn't find anything. And we didn't have phones back then. We didn't have a phone, so you couldn't call anybody. And she got so overwhelmed with, well, where are my keys? What happened to this? What happened to that? And my sister Kim was playing with the keys, and she was spinning them on the floor, and they went underneath the stove. And instead of telling my mother they're underneath the stove, she just acted like she didn't know where they were. And the same thing with the clicker. And anyways, the temperatures dropped, and we were stuck there. And my mother got so overwhelmed with, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? As a young single mother, she had to sleep. I gotta lay down. I have to sleep. I'll figure this out. And so this black dog started showing up outside, and me and my sisters were watching him out the window. And he'd show up, and then he'd go away, and then he'd show up again. And he came right up to the window closest to my bed. He was on the outside, obviously. And I looked right at him. And then the next morning I woke up, he was laying on the outside underneath the window. And he ended up stopping traffic and getting these two people, an old man and an old woman that my mother refers to as Bert and Gert, to come up to the house. And they got up there, and they said, well, you're out of propane, we can give you a ride to the store, we can help you with this, we can help you with that. They did all these things for my mother, and it was because Black stopped them in the road. And I remember that woman, she said to Black, she said, you done good. And she made him something to eat and gave him water and everything. And she said, you done good. And I held that memory with that picture forever. And my mother told me to hold that picture because at some point in time, I was supposed to give it back to her and ask her, have you found any pictures of Black yet, Mom? So that's who Black is. So I got a tender heart when it comes to dogs and wolves, because wolves are not, from my experience, are not vicious or unkind. They can quickly assess the situation and find help. And so I think about Black all the time. I think about my mother all the time. And I'm really, really grateful. My mother, I would always describe her as the most talented woman that I've ever met in my entire life. Cold temperatures, cold weather, cold situations. But if you can remember, the distance between life and death is the uncaring people that you find everywhere. And search for the caring people that care enough to do things for all the right reasons that do not include money. You would be very, very fortunate to find those people.